Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel for the 11th episode of the Road to FIDE Master series, in which I will cover the second round of the Chess Eagles Chess Festival that I've played with Denis Penza from Ukraine, rated over 1800 ELO FIDE rating. He was rated over 2000 back in the days because he is an adult player, so no joke of a player. Let's see how did the game go. I started with the move c4. You will not see me playing this move that often on this channel, I am afraid. But what's the idea? The idea is that my opponent was an adult, a very solid one, playing for many years, sticking to his opening repertoire, which was the French defense and the Slav defense. I was not really that happy about entering either of them because I hoped for the game to be more open, and I've decided to go for the c4 move because after the attempted Slav defense I would be able to perhaps push e4, changing things a little bit structurally and in terms of the openness of the position, let's say. That's that, and if he tries to play something else, I can once again enter some strange French, or maybe just simply go for the Queen's Gambit declined rather than the Slav defenses. So that was my idea. However, my opponent acknowledged that, and after c4 he was thinking for a little bit, and then he went with knight c6 move. At this point I was curious if I should enter d4 move now, because I saw in the database that my opponent is capable of playing the Chigorin defense, which I did not really study ever, so I was not sure if I want to enter that. So for that reason I decided, okay, let's play knight c3 first and maybe then d4. Opponent did not allow that, played e5, and then I got to the let's say usual setup of the English opening. And guys, what's the problem? The problem is this. This position might be considered as the reversed Sicilian, which I myself play with black pieces. So I was kind of, like making my head like flipping around in order to be able to switch the chessboard and think about this position from the, let's say, black's perspective that I'm much more used to, with one more additional tempo. It might be not the ideal way of playing chess, trying to, flip your head around all the time, but obviously I was not doing it like that at the chessboard, but rather in my mind. And it was a little bit difficult, but also perhaps, let's say, important to acknowledge that there is this difference. In order to show you what variation am I talking about, if you play with black pieces, and if you go for the, let's say, Sicilian defense with the fianchetto of the bishop here, you can get to kind of the same position that we got to in the opening at this point. I know it requires a lot of, head flipping, so I will give you 2 seconds to do it before showing you the next move, but the idea was that I felt like playing that way might allow me to enter the position that I more or less know. And I couldn't be more wrong, to be honest, because only after arriving at this position I remembered I don't like them positions in the Sicilian, So why do I enter them with white pieces? Obviously with one more tempo, but it doesn't matter that much. What matters is I'm not really happy with such structures. And this is the problem when you are trying to out-trick the opponent, because I did. I out-prep him, let's say, because I've played c4, not allowing him to enter his usual openings, but what did I get in return? Like a position that I don't like, right? So you always have to be careful what you are going for. Anyway, at this point the main line would be to play bishop d2. I briefly considered this, but I did not like the line of castle a3 takes d5, because I felt like having this center would be okay for the opponent, and my bishop pair is not that great at that point. So I felt like, okay, I don't want that, I will play something differently, and I will play e3, with the clear idea of trying to get the knight there and castle, as I would do in the Sicilian with black pieces. But the problem is this: my opponent immediately took on c3, played d6, I decided to plant my rook on the semi-open file, seems logical, castle, knight e2, queen e8, and at this point I already knew that I misplayed the position. Why? Well, what is the position, what are in the imbalances? This is the imbalance and this is the imbalance, more or less, right? So I have the bishop pair in return for the doubled pawns as an advantage for the opponent. The position is rather closed, so with the bishop pair I would like to open it up, but how to do it? After d4, e4, right? Closing the position. e4, it's not even working like tactically, because how am I even going to play such position? It's not worth it to just open this bishop for such a bad weakness. So I don't have d4, I don't have e4. f4 might be just scary for myself because queen is going there, knight is going there, I can get checkmated or something. Even though I remembered such ideas from the Sicilian, I did not want to play them yet, so like, what to do? Okay, I can castle, surely. Then he played b6. At first I felt like it's not a good positional move, but in the end he's basically trying to go here, exchange the bishops, and then perhaps blocking the position completely, making the life of this bishop miserable. So like, yeah, what to do? I was really clueless, so after 10 moves, instead of getting a playable nice position in the structures that we don't know, I got not playable position in the structure that I don't know, not we don't know, because my opponent was playing fast and he knew what to play. So guys, in such circumstances it's very hard to come up with a plan in order to win the game, because as you can tell, my opponent was once again a lower rated one, so I did not want to draw. And how can you not want in a draw in such a bad position, right? So yeah, this was the problem. I was not sure what to play. I played like rook e1. I don't even remember for like what reason I played it, but there it is. And after rook b7 I opted for bishop a3. And as you can tell, my like moves are not coordinated, my pieces are not that well placed, so what am I even trying to do? I was not sure. What's the problem in this position? I would love to play c5 in the end, because I would be able to get rid of my doubled pawns, maybe open up the position a little bit, and it's all based on this weakness. But after my opponent played knight a5, I realized that c5 is no longer working, because my opponent can simply trade the bishop and then take the pawn. And if I trade the bishop now, c5 is once again not working, and the farm move that would try to open up the position will be met with c5. And this bishop, guys, is like out of play forever. I can basically remove it from the chessboard and resign the game or something, because strategically I am completely lost. And for that reason, at this point I spent a lot of time. I played f3, trying to at least keep my bishop pair and not exchange the piece, the only one that may be showing some potential later on. Queen h5 was played. I had to protect the pawn, so if you think about my last 4 moves, it was this, and this. It's not working well, it's not looking nice. At this point I felt like I might be trying to go for the e4 move, because if I, let's say, was able to push e4, takes, and I would not have any more difficulties on the king side, I would be able to maybe maneuver my bishop here, place it like that, maybe I'm okay. But obviously at this point there is knight g4, hitting here, plenty of problems, not really working that well. And for those reasons I decided to, let's say, continue with bluffing. So this move was a pure bluff. I did not felt like it might work, but I'm continuing to tell the story. So I played bishop b4, simple trick, therefore my opponent has to go away with the knight, and now c5, once again trying to make use of the weak bishop on b7, sample line, if he takes here I can take, and bishop cannot really be taken because I will take his, activating my rook, hitting the weaknesses and so on. So actually in here I would really like my position. But at this point obviously c5s have some drawbacks. What are those? Mainly giving up the d5 square that can now be occupied by the knight. So I was mostly worried about knight to d5 move, after which I thought like I would play queen to c1, because after queen to d2 I did not like the fact that after queen h6 my queen is not protected, so I don't have the e4 move. And after queen c1 I calculated that okay, I might try to go for the e4 move, and after knight e3 I will play here and I should be okay. What I didn't see though is the variation that computer suggests, which is this one. Takes, I take, right? If he takes this way, well, I have to take once more. If he takes here, I have to take. And now rook d8. So basically opening everything up, exchanging everything that opponent can exchange, with the idea that at the end of the variation rook d1 will be played and I have no real defense against it. That would be the problem and I would be losing the game like that. But thankfully it was not that easy to spot from, let's say, this point, because how in the world from this point you can get into 5 moves to this one when the position is much more open, right? So maybe this was the reason why my opponent did not go for the knight d5 move, and to my surprise and to my relief he just took on b4. And so I took, he took here, so I took. And all of a sudden, okay, I don't have the bishop pair anymore, but at least I have some space. At least I don't have so many strategical weaknesses. So practically, I would say that this decision was a very bad one from the opponent, because I got rid of my very helpless bishop, hopeless bishop, and so on. So like, yeah, pretty happy with the outcome. And with that, I decided to at this point trade the queens, because I felt like, okay, if I can only get to the end game, I would be fine. I don't want to play this middle game anymore. My idea did not work. My plan for the game did not work. I don't want to play the middle game anymore. So I exchanged the queens, allowing my opponent to hit the pawn. And at first I thought like I will play here, and after bc I will play here, hitting the weaknesses. But then I felt, okay, I might try to switch it up and play rook b4. Once again with the same idea, if he takes, I can play here, and I saved one tempo, right? What's the problem? After rook b4, knight d7 was played, and at this point I am kind of feeling like I have to give the pawn away, because, well, I have to take on b6 now, my pawn is hit twice, c6 does not make sense, so I take, and what to do now? c5 is out of question. Should I defend the pawn? Like, maybe, but then the c5 is coming. So what to do? And at this point I have to go back with the rook, because one important thing, knight is taking away the square, right? So maybe I will just drop back and hope that after this move I will be able to somehow scare the opponent, make him go away with the knight to some bad square. But there is no bad squares really, because wherever he goes, here or like here, wherever, I cannot really take the pawn because my knight is hanging. So I would be basically willing to go into an endgame without a pawn, but at least some activity. This is what I was lacking throughout the whole game, so I was happy with just that. But to my surprise, opponent took with the bishop, allowing me to take there. He cannot recapture my rook because I would take his bishop, claiming the advantage, so he has to go to e2, and after rook b2 move, I will be simply grabbing the c5 pawn. So I don't have any problems, guys, with the material and with the activity, with nothing. So it's 0.0, finally, after 20 moves of being much worse. So I can, apply pressure in the endgame. So I started with simply developing my pieces, and at this point I felt like, okay, let's go with f4. The idea is this: I can try to cut away the d file and grab the bishop on d3, right? If he takes, I take. Unfortunately, I cannot play this because after takes there is one additional trick. So for that reason I had to recapture, and after this move he played bishop e4, allowing me to go into a better rook endgame. It's not winning yet, and I've played it not the most precise way, let's say. So that's why in the thumbnail you saw so many missed wins, because, well, it's far from being clean. But at least my opponent was in a very big time trouble, so I felt like, okay, I might be trying to push him and push him and push him, maybe he will break. So how did the game continue? I played king e3, after which I felt like he might have this check and this option, making my rook passive with the possibilities of drawing the game. I did not like it, but well, what else can I do? But at this point I could have played simply rook a5. Surprisingly, computer likes my position after rook e7, which is trying to hold my pawns. Why? I don't know. I went with the human option. I'm not that mad at myself for that. So I took a pawn, he gave me a check, I covered, I went there. So I have pawn advantage, I have better rook, should be fine. At this point I started advancing my pawns on the king side, and my opponent played h6. Usually when you are trying to hold the position, it's a good idea to just hold it, like no pawn moves, no whatever, just stay still, hope for the best. Such move will always create some additional weaknesses, so practically it's not a good idea. At this point I had two ideas, either to push f5 or h5, trying to open the 6th rank, and I opted for f5. It allowed me to create a passer on f file and hit the pawn, but the thing is that in this variation I have to be precise, and I was not. At this point I threw the game away. Look at the eval bar, guys. Let's do it on repeat, okay? In here I have a crushing advantage, in here it's dropping very much, and it means that in the end game when eval bar is dropping so much, it's a draw perhaps. Why? Opponent had a very nice way of trying to hit my a pawn with rook e5, rook a5, rook a2 moves, and having such pawns is not always winning. With such a passive rook and such a passer, it's even harder to win. I will not get into the all details because such positions are quite complicated. I don't know them all. I just knew that I don't want to get to such positions, but I still allow that to happen. So not great by myself, but I was purely hoping that my opponent will just break in the time pressure, as I've said before. So I went with rook h6, and instead of finding this maneuver, he went with rook e1, allowing me to now push the king up. After rook a1, I defended the pawn, also attacking his one, and at this point I felt like, alright, I can basically take the pawn, go here, and win the game or not. I didn't know, guys. I have 3 more pawns, and I'm not even sure if this position is winning for me. How is it possible? Where my king is out of moves, because it's stuck on the h file, I cannot move here because of the checkmate. Therefore my pawn is out of moves, this pawn is out of moves. Rook is kind of also out of moves because it has to protect the pawn, so how am I even going to progress? I did not know that, I saw only this position, I did not calculate any further, and I didn't like the fact that I am out of moves, in a kind of Zugzwang, you know? So for that reason I decided to at least give away the f-pawn, because it would make my rook like more free, if that makes sense. But still, I have the problem of the king being stuck on the h file, and even though this position is winning by the opening book, sorry, not the opening book, the end game book, let's say, it's not that easy for humans, and I won this mainly because my opponent allowed me to do it effortlessly, but he could have put a great fight, and this motive, guys, will be an amazing one. So let's just play out a few moves. The idea for him to defend the position would be to basically copy paste my king moves. So if my king stays on the king side, his king should also stay there. If my king tries to go there, he should have copied me and do it all the time. At this point I felt like I will be playing rook f4, after rook a1, a4, rook a2, and now I have the decision. Should I go here or there, right? Because rook is placed very nicely. And as I've said, if I go king g5, he goes king g7. If I go king e5, he can go king e7, basically having an opposition. And I'm not sure if I can progress, right? I felt like that's the option. In the game, he just played rook f1, allowing me to go away, then cut the king away, have it stuck there, and then it's easy peasy to win. I will get back to this in a second, because this motive, guys, is much more interesting. How to win this? I did not know that. So if I go here, he goes back, and so on. So endgame book showed me this motive. h5, rook h2, a5. Very interesting move. Why is it working? Well, I'm losing 2 pawns, right? Well, not really. After king g4, I'm hitting both the rook and the king. King g6, rook f6, takes, king e6, not in time to be in my pawn square, so I will promote easily. Alright, so what can he do other than taking the pawn? Well, maybe going back to this one, right? Because, well, why not? At this point, I would have to give a check here. He would have to go to g8 because this move would allow me to check him with a tempo. And at this point I go rook f5, rook g2, king f6, king f8. And look at this, guys. It's basically the same position as here, but with one line up, one rank up. And at this point I would have to repeat it all again. So h6, a6, king g6, and the idea is that at this point the chessboard like ended, right? He has no line to go down, no rank to go down. He has to go either here and get checkmated into moves, or here, finally giving me space for my king and for my pawn to be able to promote. So an amazing geometry, chess, mathematical stuff, whatever, and this would be the idea to win. Would I found it? I don't really know, guys, but as I've said, thankfully in the game opponent allowed me to close his king there, and even though he then realized that he has to cut away my king from this pawn, I am just far too close to it. So I played rook c4, king c5, a5, a6, and at this point my opponent resigned the game because he still didn't grab this pawn, and my a pawn is already very much advanced with the king around it, so I will be winning. So very interesting rook endgame. with many mistakes from both sides, and not only the rook endgame, guys. The middle game was just a total disaster, mainly from my perspective. So as I've said in the previous analysis, previous recap, I am recording both of those games one after the other to just forget about them. Just record it and throw them away. I don't want to see them ever again because they were far, far, far from being good, not even saying very good. So let's say what was the review. Let's check it. I feel like, well, 87 is overrated, I believe, for me. I've made terrible mistakes, like two misses, two mistakes. Misses are in the end game, mistakes are in the opening, I believe. So yeah, as you can tell, opening very bad one, end game not the greatest, middle game I was just saving everything, so maybe it's a good sign, but yeah, overall not a good game. Once again, below the 90 percentage. So what can I tell you guys? Thank you very much for watching those first two episodes of the second tournament of the playlist. 2 out of 2, so will not complain anymore. And as I've said, I will just forget about those games. If you want to do that, please do so. I will not blame you for doing that. Please give a like if you enjoyed my misery. And we'll see each other tomorrow in the third game. Hopefully, better one. We'll see. Thank you and bye bye.